Section 1.2. We're going to talk about some properties of numbers. The most important property we're going to talk about is called the order of operations. Now, when I teach this class face-to-face, I always ask the students who knows the order of operations. Raise your hand, and every hand in the room goes up. Everybody knows the order of operations. However, online I see many of these quote viral math problems, and I read the comments and I notice a whole lot of people don't get the right answer. So pause the video, take a second, work that problem out and see what you get. And then in a few minutes we'll come back to it and see if you got the right answer. All right, so what is the order of operations? The order of operations is a list of rules that tell us the order to do stuff when we see adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and exponents. All right, so the first rule, students will always tell me parentheses, and I don't like the word parentheses, I like brackets. For two reasons. One, I struggle to spell parentheses, but more importantly, when students think parentheses, the only thing they think are these round parentheses, which are a form of brackets. So round brackets certainly work. We also sometimes will see square brackets. We'll see curly brackets. And then there are other things that students don't think of as brackets, but they really are. This one. A big division sign like that. And let me give you an example. If I give you 6 plus 3 over 4 plus 1, students will sometimes want to reduce the 6 and the 4, but you can't. This big fraction bar is really a set of parentheses. And what it tells you have to do is you have to do everything on top and you have to do everything on bottom. Then and only then can you divide. And as you can see in this problem, now we can't reduce anything. 9 and 5 don't have anything in common. And another one that students don't think about as a form of parenthesis is that symbol, square root. If I give you square root of 16 plus 9, square root is a parenthesis. You have to add those together first. 16 plus 9 is 25, and then you can do square root. Square root of 25 is 5. Notice that this is wrong. This is not the same as square root of 16 plus square root of 9, which is 4 plus 3, which is 7. All right. Square root is a kind of parenthesis. Not one that people usually think about, but it is a parenthesis. All right, so brackets. Anytime you have things in brackets, that of course comes first. The second thing that comes is exponents. All right, and exponents, you know hopefully what exponents are. If I give you something like 3 squared, that means 3 times 3, which is 9. Or if I gave you something like 5 times 2 cubed, you do the exponent first. 2 cubed is 8. 8 times 5 is 40, so that's 5 times 8, which is 40. Exponents come before multiply. All right, I'm going to do some more examples of exponents in a minute, ones that really baffle students for a while, but we'll figure those out. What comes next is multiply and divide. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake. Multiply does not come first. Divide does not come first. With these two, you work left to right. So if a divide sign comes before a multiply sign, you do the divide first. Conversely, if the multiply sign comes first, you do the multiply. And then lastly, we have add, subtract. And again, these go left to right. So in other words, if I have 8 minus 3 plus 4, I do the 8 minus 3 first because it's on the left. So that would be 5 plus 4, which is 9. And in this case, it doesn't make a difference. If you did it in the wrong order, you would happen to get 9. That has something to do with something else that we'll talk about in a few minutes, the commutative property, but that's not important right now. Okay, so let's go back to this example that's up here and think about what you got for an answer. And let's see if we get the same answer I get. All right, we have a set of parentheses. So clearly that comes first. 1 plus 2 is 3. So this is 6 divided by 2 times 3. And here is where a lot of people will make the mistake. And it comes down to, like I said, number 3, multiply and divide. A lot of people will do 2 times 3 next. But that's not correct. Not correct at all. Multiply and divide goes left to right. So I should divide first. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this is 3 times 3, which is 9. And a lot of people will say the answer is 1. And they're incorrect because they will do this multiply first. 2 times 3 is 6, and they'll do 6 divided by 6, which is 1, and that's not correct. All right, so watch out for those. That is when if you ever see any of these viral math problems, that's almost always where the mistake is made, that there's a division and a multiply, and people do the multiply first, and you shouldn't. Okay, so a really, really common thing people tell me when I say, what's the order of operations? They'll say something like PEMDAS or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Personally, I don't like either of those. And I think memorizing those is where people get the mistake that multiply comes before division and adding comes before subtraction. They don't come in that order. Multiply and divide are equal, whichever one comes first in the list. All right, I told you I wanted to do a few more exponent problems. I'm going to go down here. We'll get to these problems in just a minute. A few more exponent problems. What I want to do is minus 5 squared versus minus 5 squared. All right, again, this is a really, really big order of operations thing where people usually make a mistake. Negative 5 squared, this means to take negative 5 and multiply it by negative 5. And when I multiply two negatives, I get a positive, so I get 25. This one, people get wrong. And it's a simple thing. What comes first? Exponents or negatives? Well, negatives aren't really here. There's add and subtract. There's no adding and subtracting here. All right, well, what if I did this? What if I put a 0 in front of this? That doesn't really change anything, right? Adding and subtracting a 0 doesn't change anything. Now people would follow the order of operations and say, well, now I do 5 squared first. So this is 0 minus 25. It's negative 25. And that's really the correct answer. Powers come before minus signs. If you don't like that answer, I'll give you another one. Negative 5 squared. This negative, the way we write this, is really us being lazy. This is really negative 1 times 5 squared is what that means. If I were to write it that way, nobody would get the wrong answer. Because everybody would say, well, exponents come first, and then I multiply. So this is negative 1 times 25, which is negative 25. This is going to be a big deal later when we have variables. Let's say I have x squared minus 3x, and I tell you plug in x equals negative 2. What I will see a lot of students do is they'll write negative 2 squared minus 3 times negative 2. And then they'll type that into their calculator. I'm going to type it into my calculator. Negative 2 squared minus 3 times negative 2. And they'll tell me the answer is 2, and that's the wrong answer. And the reason it's the wrong answer is because x squared means to take this value of x and multiply it by itself twice. The calculator's following the order of operations. The calculator did the 2 squared, then it did the minus. What you really need is this, because x squared is x times x. So when I plug in negative 2, I really need negative 2 times negative 2. And in order to do that, you've got to put it in parentheses. So this is going to be a big, big thing I'm going to deal with later, that when you're plugging in negative numbers, always put them in parentheses. Because then when you use your calculator, you'll get the right answer. The correct answer is 10, because this is 4. 4 plus 6 is 10. All right, we got time for a few examples, then I'll have to pause and start part 2. All right, so -3 minus -6. Hopefully you remember that when you're subtracting, 2 negatives become a positive. So minus -6 is a plus 6. Then we have -3 plus 6. The 6 is bigger than 3, and the 6 is the positive one. This is the negative, so the answer is going to be positive. This is the same as 6 minus 3, which is 3. All right, when we're multiplying, 2 negatives make a positive. So that one's 10. All right, next one. We got to follow the order of operations here. We're going to do inside the parentheses first. That's -4 times 3 divided by -2. Now, this big fraction bar, again, that's a set of parentheses. So we really need to do -4 times 3 next. That's -12 over -2. And now finally we can divide. When we divide 2 negatives, we get a positive. That's 6. All right. Here's a really, really common mistake students will do. They'll look at this and they'll go 4 minus 2. And they'll tell me that's 2. Well, 4 minus 2 is 2. Don't disagree with that. But it's not the right thing to do, because this 2 is connected to something by multiply. So before I can do this subtraction, I have to do that multiply. But before I can do that multiply, I got to do the parentheses. So this is 4 minus 2 times 4. Now I need to multiply. That's going to be 4 minus 8. 2 times 4 is 8. 4 minus 8, that's -4. All right, so watch for that one. That's a common error right there. You really want to go left to right, because that's how we read. That would make life a lot easier, but that's not how we're going to do this, because multiply comes before subtraction. All right, I'm going to pause, make this part 1, and then I'll finish this section off with a part 2.